Okay, yes, so welcome again, everybody. Thank you very much for taking some time out on this Tuesday evening to learn about the Oxford Rivers portal. I'm Claire, I'm from Thames 21, as I've said. Thanks for sharing a bit where you're from and why you're interested in rivers. And I'm just going to quickly, this is the only slide I have, talk about Thames 21. So we're a rivers trust. There's lots of different rivers trusts across the country. In different areas that are about protecting their local river. We're 21 years old actually this year. We have 50 staff, but 7,000 volunteers, and yeah, the volunteers are a massive part of what we do. We're mainly based in London. It started off with litter picks on the Thames foreshore, as you can see in the picture there, but it's expanded a lot into lots of different areas. So restoring unhealthy rivers by perhaps rewilding them, rewiggling them, and trying to clean them up as well. Lots of education, campaigning and advocacy. And yeah, people do sometimes ask where we get our funding from. Most of it comes from grants and charitable trusts, but a small amount does come from Thames Water as well. So we like to be transparent about that. And we're primarily based in London. I'm actually the furthest upstream. I'm the Oxford Rivers Project Officer, but it should probably be Oxfordshire because I cover more than just Oxford. And yeah, you can check out our website and our events and latest news there. So part of the work I've been doing has been to create this thing called the Oxford Rivers portal. So this is the Oxford Rivers portal. It's oxfordrivers.ceh.ac.uk, and I'll write that in the chat. But sort of, I guess, why did we create this? Why have we had this project? Well, you might have sort of noticed that rivers and sewage particularly has been in the news a lot more over the past 3 or 4, 5 years than it had before. I mean, I can't really remember hearing about rivers in the news before about 2020. And a big part of that is, campaigning by campaigners to expose this issue of raw sewage going into our rivers. So I think before 2017, water companies weren't even required to monitor how often this was happening, and then they were required to put monitors on their sewage treatment works. 2019 was the first year that it had been sort of rolled out across the whole country, and so in 2020, campaigners found this information and released it to the press. And I think that year it was 200,000 spills of raw sewage. In subsequent years, as the monitoring's expanded, it's gone up. I think 2023 it was over nearly 600,000 individual spill occasions for over 4.6 million hours. So it's really still really shocking, even though we hear these numbers so much. And yes, it's quite mad that this wasn't really known about, or the public weren't allowed to know about this, given the amount of people that use rivers for all sorts of things, for wild swimming, for fishing, for rowing, angling, yeah, so it's actually, environmental information is something that people legally are allowed to know about, and it wasn't even, so for instance, bacteria wasn't even tested for in rivers at all in the country before 2020. So nowhere in the whole of the UK was bacteria tested for in rivers. So lots of different groups, campaign groups, have been part of trying to change this, including us at Thames 21. We campaigned to get a bathing water at Oxford successfully, and to get the Environment Agency to start testing for bacteria there. We campaigned for Thames Water to start telling us live when sewage was going into the river. And now that's actually been put into the Environment Act, so all water companies have to give a live alert when there's sewage going into the river. But we still think that this isn't enough, you know, just to know when sewage is going in. There's a lot of other information about rivers and how polluted they are, how clean they are, or how safe it is to swim or not safe it is to swim. And, you know, historically, it's been very difficult to get at that. It's only been the water companies or the Environment Agency or academics who've been able to access that information. And we really think that everyone should be able to access that information. And that information should be better and more widespread. So that's why we created this portal and this project. I'll just show you, and it's quite new, so it only sort of launched in September last year. It's actually been partly funded by the EU, nicely. They've still funding us, even though we're not in them anymore. And also the actual website was built by CEH, which are a local research institute. So this is the front page, what it looks like. And we've got these 2 introductory videos, which are about 2 minutes each. So yeah, I'd recommend if you're you know, sharing this with other people, to show them those videos. I won't show you the videos now, I don't think, because I've kind of talked through what they say. And then down the bottom, we've actually got just a quick overview of what data you can find in this portal. And there's already a bit of jargon in here, so I just thought I'd try and, you know, jargon bust this for you. So this one, yeah, so you can click on them to find out a bit more. So EA bathing water sites, there's only 2 in Oxfordshire at the moment, Wolvercott and Wallingford. So these are popular swimming locations, and the Environment Agency tests here for bacteria. So that shows you the bacteria levels. We've got storm overflow sites. So that's locations where raw sewage discharges into rivers and streams. We've got flood warning sites. So we put on our map where there are flood alerts, flood warnings, or severe flood warnings. The water level. So these 4 are kind of more people-related things. Then we've got the Environment Agency water quality sites. So these are spot samples to test river water quality, and they're more environment focused things that they're measuring. So that's more about pollution that might affect the invertebrates, the animals that live in the water, or the plants, not so much the people, although we're, you know, inadvertently affected down the line because we're in the food chain as well. Water quality sonde sites, so that's similar, but these are expensive bits of kit which can be put in the water and can just monitor things continuously. But again, that's sort of more related to the environment. Then we've got sewage treatment rate sites. So I think we've got this for 20 different works. So that's actually showing you the rate of sewage treatment, and that can tell you, I'll show you a bit later, but that can tell you about whether that treatment works is operating as it should or not. We've got some rainfall sites. And then these last 2 with the microscopes, these are citizen science sites. So rather than being the data provided by the regulator, by the Environment Agency or Thames Water, the water company, these are where the data has been provided by normal people like yourselves, and I know some of you have already taken some of these measurements. So this is Freshwater Watch is measuring for phosphates and nitrates, so more related to the environment. And the water testing River Thames sites doesn't say it here, we need to add it in, but this is bacteria that's being tested by citizen scientists. So this one's more related to people and swimming and using the river, and Freshwater Watch is more related to the broader environment, the animals and the plants. Okay, and then up here, the key sort of link, you can go up here or you can go here, is the data portal itself. So we're going to click on that and it's loading. Just move my sharing bar. So what this shows you in the first instance is what we call like the standard view, and that's focusing on what the river conditions are today. So it focuses in on Oxfordshire because that's where we have the most data, where we've downloaded most data into the portal. If you zoom out, we do actually have some data for all over the country and some for London as well. But it's mainly in the name meant to be focused on Oxfordshire. So what we've got, are these triangles are all storm overflow sites. So those are all places where raw sewage can discharge into rivers and streams. And it's a bad situation today with all the rain that we've had recently. So all the red ones are actually spilling raw sewage right now into rivers. And you can hover over them and they'll tell you where they are and what's happening. Yellow is, it's not spilling raw sewage right now, but it has been in the last 48 hours. And green is it's not spilling right now. So as a broad rule of thumb that I use if I'm going to go for a swim is that and this isn't, you know, the gospel of truth or whatever, it's just what I use, so you know, it's always at your own risk. But unfortunately there's not as much research on this as there should be, but I tend to not swim if there's been a spill within 48 hours upstream in about a 5-kilometre radius. That's my sort of rule of thumb. But also, if you think about it, larger rivers are going to be more diluted than smaller rivers. So the Thames, it looks like, is the main body of the Thames is often cleaner than the smaller tributaries going into it. So yes, so you can zoom into where you live and you can find your local treatment works and that sort of thing. What we've also got on here are flood warnings. So yeah, those are the little houses with flood symbols. There's another Environment Agency website for that, which tells you what these different things mean. A flood alert is, I think, still the lowest level. I think a flood warning is higher, but you should check that. You've also got the water levels, which are these little wiggly lines. So I'll zoom in a bit more. With these, you have the typical high, so the upper limit typically, the typical low level, and then the latest value. So here at Ensham Lock near me, the high level is 0.37 meters, and at the moment, well, at 6:45 p.m. today, it was 0.3 meters, the typical high, latest value 0.33. And yes, there's a few of those for other places. Some of them look a bit odd, but often they're at locks, so the levels aren't what you expect. So for instance, Osney Lock is it's currently at minus 0.056, but that's because it's measured within the lock itself. Whereas if you go all the way up to Islip, that's 7.8 is a typical high, and it's at the moment at 7.955. So yeah, it's high water out there at the moment. So that could be useful if you're, you know, a kayaker or a rower, or, you know, if you're just generally interested in what the water levels are doing around you. And then we've also just got the sites where the bathing waters are located at Wolvercott and Wallingford. So that's the standard view. It's quite basic. And you can also change the background to a satellite or to a map with more streets, so it's easier to find where you're located. But I'll stick with the light map for now because it's simpler. So then we've got the detailed view, which contains a lot more different options. And really the detailed view is for people who aren't so much, just interested in the conditions today, but are perhaps more interested in the conditions over time in their local area, or how your local sewage treatment works is operating, the condition of your local river. So actually, I'll just show you. This is in the bottom left corner. That's how you can turn layers on and off. So I'm going to just turn the water levels off because it makes it easier to look at everything. So what we've got on the portal is data. 2021 is is the earliest data that we have, just to make sure it all loads. So with lots of these icons, you can click on them and it brings up a graph of data over time at that location. So for instance, for this graph, this is the bathing water quality at Wolvercott. So one of the places that the Environment Agency measure bacteria. And on the right-hand side, you've got the different things that they're measuring. And if you hover over them, it gives you a simple explanation of what they are. And before I sort of talk about what this kind of shows, I'll just show you how to use the sort of graph in general. You can change the date range to go back in time. So you can see they only test the bacteria in the summer, but you can see 3 years worth of data going back there. You can also zoom in. Well, you can hover over to get the measurement that you want. And you can also even zoom in by just selecting an area of the graph and then hovering over if you want to look in more detail. And then once you've done that, you can click Reset Axes, which is this home button, and that clicks it back to the original view. You can also download the data as a picture. So then you've got the graph there, and you can even download the data, the raw data itself. So there's a lot you can do with that. And for the swimmers who are interested, these lines are the sufficient threshold, so they show the sort of higher level of safety for bacteria. And so really, if the measurements are below that line, that's good, and if they're above that line, that's a higher risk of getting ill from swimming in the water. So you can see that this past summer has actually been relatively good. The red bacteria, the enterococci, has been on the line sometimes. But if you look back, 2023, it was better earlier in May and then worse later on. And 2022, we had some really big spikes in July, which, if people remember, was a drought period. So that's one graph, but that is not all. You can also stack graphs on top of one another, so you can start to see different data sets at once. So up here we've got a sewage treatment site called Cassington, and you can click on that and start to look at, this is so this is toggle legend, so turn off the legend, so I'm going to get rid of that bit at the side to make it easier. These are the sewage spills over time. So Cassington is quite a good treatment works in that it doesn't spill very often. But again, if you can hover over, you can see when this raw sewage started to spill, when it stopped, when it started stopped, and look back over time. And so yes, we didn't have any spills really in the bathing water season, so that's really good. We don't want any spills when people are swimming. These two axes aren't quite lining up, but if you move this, then you can get them to line up. You can see that these spills here are in the winter, when still some people are swimming. I mean, ideally we don't want spills at all. But I mean, you compare something like this, Cassington, to quite nearby Church Hamborough sewage treatment works, which goes into this very small stream. And yeah, you can really see the difference there. I mean, this one, it just looks like it doesn't ever, I mean, it hardly ever treats the sewage. It looks like it basically just, for the majority of the time, spills raw sewage. And every single one of these triangles will have a graph like that. And yeah, so you can compare treatment works near you. And also with the river levels, you can get graphs of that up as well. But yeah, what about the other data sets that I spoke about at the beginning? My computer's, so it's doing too much, trying to do Teams and the portal at the same time. Just gonna refresh it, I think. Yeah, so I've talked about just a few of the data sets, but we've got lots of other data sets as well. So down here in the detail, that's when you can start to turn them on and off. So I'm just going to zoom in on a smaller area to make it a bit more understandable. So I'm going to zoom in on iSlip here. And so these are the sites where the Environment Agency go and monitor water quality. And they monitor lots of different things, which can make it quite confusing to understand what it all means. So I'll show you. So this site they monitor, as you can see, 17, I think 17 different things. Oh no, this site they only monitor 5, makes it a bit easier. But again, you can hover over different measurements, and you can even at the side, it tells you a little bit about what that measurement indicates for the river. So the temperature, the pH, the oxygen in the river. You can look back over time. So this is quite interesting. This doesn't mean that we don't have data here. It means that they weren't actually monitoring in these years. And they only started monitoring in October 2023. We can compare that to this site very close by. Whereas here they were monitoring in 2021 and early 2022, but then they've stopped. But they were monitoring lots more different things. So this is one if you were really interested in detailed analysis, or if you were worried about a site near you and looking for particular spikes in pollution. The sondes are, there aren't so many of them. They're quite few and far between because they're expensive. I'll just show you what that looks like, and you can see the difference in the different kinds of data. So you can see here with the sonde site, it's very frequent. So they kind of monitor it almost every, I think it's every 15 minutes. So although there's a gap here, so it's very, very high resolution data, but that is good that you can more easily see spikes. So conductivity is actually a measure of like the amount of salt in the water, and if that spikes, that can indicate pollution. So I'm going to get rid of those. There's also the sewage treatment rate sites for about 20 different sewage treatment plants. These are not publicly available anywhere other than here. You have to ask Thames Water for them, so it's quite a lengthy process to get this, which is why we only have data for a year. But they're really showing you the rate of sewage treatment, which doesn't sound particularly fascinating. None of us really want to think about sewage as much as we have, but the interesting thing is that what we've got here is the rate that they're actually treating the sewage, and the red line is the level that they're actually allowed to legally spill raw sewage. So the way it's meant to work is that they can treat a certain amount, and then if the treatment work, if it gets overloaded and there's too much going into the treatment works, they have to divert it to these big concrete storm tanks. And if there's still too much coming in, they have to release that into the river. So really, this indicates that the only time they would be allowed to release it is this spike here in October 2023. So then you can begin to compare that with the actual sewage spills in 2023, and you can see that there's one in January when it doesn't look like they're even at the flow to full treatment value. And also in March, when again it looks like they're well below the value. So yes, so this is stuff that we've shared with Ofwat, the Environment Agency, and people at Ofwat are investigating Thames Water at the moment, as are the Environment Agency. But I think it's interesting and important to know and good for campaigning. For instance, if there was a new development coming up in your area, showing how the treatment works are operating currently. So you can see in Oxford, it's often going over the level that it's meant to, that they're allowed to spill up. Okay. Not too much more listening to me left. There's just a couple more points how to use this. So the other two I wanted to show, so first of all, the freshwater watch sites. So immediately you can see all these purple dots are where citizen scientists have been sampling. And there's so many sample sites that we haven't been able to put them all on here, but it just sort of shows how amazing citizen science is and how many areas you can cover compared to the Environment Agency and the coverage that they have. So going back to islip, yeah, let's have a look here. Yeah, it's quite simple. It's nitrate, phosphate, and turbidity. And you can turn different things on and off and start to have a look. It does give you a range rather than an exact value. So it's not as exact as the Environment Agency, but it's still good. So seeing sort of lower nitrate between January and April, and then going up in June. So there's some interesting patterns there. And then some phosphate spikes. So phosphate and nitrate are two nutrients that if you have too many of them, you can get an overgrowth of algae, and that can affect the river in lots of ways. So particularly phosphate, we do not want, well, both phosphate and nitrate, we do not want too high levels of them. And then the last one for swimmers particularly are these, and kayakers and paddleboarders, these water testing River Thames sites. So this is where, okay, I'm going to turn off a few because it's getting very messy. This is where citizen scientists have been measuring bacteria using different methods. And again, we've presented them the same way as the Environment Agency maps. Let's get rid of that. So you can see there was a really high spike in September of this year, which related to a lot of, we had that very, very heavy rainfall and all that flooding. But yes, sort of you can zoom, well, oopsie. You can zoom in and, well, it's a bit hard to see on this graph, but broadly it's lower than the threshold. And there's quite a few sites all the way down the Thames. And a few of these should be sampled this coming summer as well, because people want to know what the water quality is like now, not just in the past. But for instance, here, Bolter's Lock, they've been sampling very regularly. They've still been sampling all through the winter. So you can see generally pretty good water quality in the summer, which is encouraging, and starting to get worse in the winter. Jubilee River, yeah, so this one, again, not bad in the summer. These ones are a bit high at the end of September, and then, yeah, getting much higher as you go into the winter. So yeah, we're hoping to add more of these this year, throughout Oxford, particularly in the different places people swim in Oxford, to measure bacteria, so people can, you know, look at that and have a think about whether they want to swim or not, and, you know, also importantly push Thames Water and the authorities to change things. So that's a lot of data, a lot of information. Hope you've at least got something out of that. Just want to tell you a bit more about the rest of the website, because there is more information here to help you use it and understand it. You don't just need me sort of talking about it. So we have got, so on the data, got this understanding the data page, which really tells you what I've sort of said and even more detail about all these different data sets we've got here, where they come from, where the source is, what the license is, and then if you click in, yeah, so that tells you, for instance, about the flood alerts. If you look at the bacteria ones, it tells you a lot more detail about what that means. If you look at the EA water quality sites, we've got a lot more detail about specific things and what that means for the river. We've also, I mean, yes, data is good, but we want to do something with it. So we've got this get involved section. So you've got a report pollution thing. So this is if you see these signs of serious pollution, dead fish, fish gasping for air, other wildlife in distress, large amounts of oil or foam, bad or chemical odour, discoloured water, large amounts of litter or sewage debris, you should report that immediately to the Environment Agency, which have a 24-hour hotline, and Thames Water also have a report a problem tool. And we've got this take action section, which is about how can I make a difference, and lots of different ideas there, depending on which way you want to approach it, as an individual, as a citizen scientist, as a community group, as an advocate, campaigner. We've got a map with some organisations here, but there are definitely more in Oxfordshire that are doing things for rivers, so need to update that as well. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I've got a bit more to say maybe at the end about different things that Thames 21 are working on, but I feel like I've talked for long enough.